Hello, I'm Joseph, and this is my review of the Deco Pro 2nd Generation XL. If you don't want to listen to this entire review, here's what I'll sum up this product to be. It's more than just the 16,000 levels of pressure sensitivity, it's the redesign of the X3 Elite Pro pen, and then the in combination of the keyboard shortcut and just the phenomenal end-to-end drawing experience that you get on the pen tablet itself.
Let's talk about the pen. So obviously it comes with that metal casing. It comes with like a rubberized plastic insert or foam insert, for felt, for regular. The USB dongle here does not go to the pen tablet. It actually goes to the keyboard shortcut. Um, and then the pen itself is an improvement over the X3 Elite Plus pen. This is the X3 Elite pen, the non-plus variant, which means it doesn't come with the eraser. Unfortunately, you cannot interchange these pens with this pen tablet. I was really hoping that was going to be the case, but it does not seem like it is. And the reason I say that is because I kind of like this pen a little bit more in terms of just drawing, with the exception of the kind of tip here, which I'll talk about. But yeah, this comes with a silicone grip. The button placement is still placed quite high. It is a little bit lower than the X3 Elite pen and X3 Elite Plus pen. Here, that's that more appropriate kind of showcase of that in terms of where the barrel starts and stops. It's a little bit longer too. So with the addition of the eraser and the redesign of the barrel, it's just a tad bit longer and stuff like that. The buttons are clicky. They're not really any more clicky than the button that's already here. It's a little bit more muted of a sound. That's the only thing I noticed. And then the barrel tip here is a better redesign than what was already here. And that's simply because specifically at this point, if you're beveling, if you're like tilting and it touches this point, the tip will lift off of the actual, let's see if I can show that, it would lift off the actual, wherever you have. So if you're used to doing like shading in like this, where it's very elongated at a fairly high angle, you wouldn't actually get the tip to touch at all. With the X3 Elite Plus or Pro pen, that definitely does happen. You do get, that able to get that higher, more extreme tilt. And they're both 60-degree tilt, not get any improvement on that. Um, Now, the felt nib I definitely like, but it does wear down very, very quickly. I'm not sure if you're gonna be able to see kind of where it was wearing down at, but it's right there. Um, it's gonna wear down fast, but these tips are fairly cheap compared to what other manufacturers are providing them at. I'm happy that XP is not gouging you for felt tips in that regard. The last bit we'll talk about is the 16K, so you get 16,000 levels of pressure for both the tip and the eraser. Um, I can't see it. I think of the big issue here is that the report rate for this pen is 200 hertz. A lot, or yeah, I think it's 200. Is it hertz or megahertz? It's just one of those two. But it's the same report rate as the X3 Elite and X3 Elite Plus pens. And I think where I would have seen that if it was a higher report rate, like 260 or even 300, is that when you're going from a thick to thin and you're doing it in a fast succession, like you're finishing off a stroke and you're lifting that pen off, if it had more data points to work with, it wouldn't have been the same type of taper that you would see with the X3 Elite or X3 Elite Plus pen. But beyond that, it's still a very, very good pen. I love the amount of control I can get out of that in conjunction with the felt tip. I will say that when you're drawing fast with the felt tip, you're not really getting any kind of better control. It's when you slow down your pen that you really start to feel that felt tip against this kind of texture here. And yeah, that's it. Hopefully that's enough information about this pen. There's not really much to say about it. Oh, one little thing I noticed is that this can actually unscrew. And so you can take off the little plastic bit here and replace the silicone grip, should it ever need to come to that, because I have had some silicone grips where like the base starts to get super loose here. And it would be nice to eventually replace that at some point if that was possible. I don't know if XP Pen's going to do that, but it would be nice if they could offer that, or even have the option to put like different color kind of silicone grips. I think that would be pretty cool as well.
Let's talk about the nibs for a second. So the one back here is for the X3 Elite. It's a little used up, but it's the same kind of design. I have a bunch more here that came with the actual pen for the X3 Elite. And then in the front is the X3 Elite Pro. So there seems to be a little bit of a redesign in that base that I'm noticing. I'm going to showcase a couple pens here. So this is the X3 Elite pen. This is the pen that you would get from like the Deco Fun and many of the older pens from XP Pen. and obviously the XP Pen Pro pen. And then lastly, let's step back there. I have a Wacom pen on hand as well. So I'm going to show kind of like worst to kind of best. So the worst here is obviously their older pen tech, the oldest pen tech that I think they still sell, which is from like the Deco Fun, which recently came out. But you can see quite a bit of kind of wobble in the base of the nib. Even when switching to the X3 Elite, there's still some significant wobble in the base there. It's a little bit easier to see because it is a thinner nib. So that's that. Then here is an older Wacom pen, but kind of the same idea. There's a little bit of wobble, but not as much as the other two. And then kind of the best one, obviously, is the X3 Elite Pro pen, which really doesn't have much at all. I'm having to kind of like put a lot of pressure to even get that to kind of deflect and stuff like that. So a massive improvement catching up to what Wacom's been offering in terms of just nib stability in general, and having a better tolerances in a pen that equate to the nib, but it could also equate to just having a better tolerance in the actual barrel design that they've have there.
So we need to talk about this because there's a three products I'm showcasing here, but they all have different kind of iterums of what makes the kind of extra large in the texture and the grip, like just super pristinely awesome for me. Um, so when you're drawing, here let me just make a little thing here. You have your shoulder, right, and then you have your elbow and your arm, and then you have your your hand, your wrist, and you're drawing with your pen, right? Um, I try to do the majority of my movement with my shoulder and my elbow, where then the pressure is controlled with my hand. That's what this one and this one displays out pretty damn well because I'm using my shoulder and my elbow and then using my hand to control pressure. The difference between why these two kind of look vastly different, meaning that you can see check marks in the WH1409 and you don't really see them at all in the Pro Gen 2, is that there is a big difference in grip and control in the texture of the top surfaces between these two pen tablets. WH1409 is a very smooth surface. It's something that I hate because it's really hard to control an arc. And you can see that exactly right there where it kind of goes straight and then it turns again. It makes it difficult to make kind of this expected arc or smooth strokes in, and it's not like, oh, well, I can just do this with my hands, using my hands to kind of move the pen around. No, I'm trying to use my shoulder. And so there's some loss in control and having these really finite details. And you can see how the Deco Pro here really delivers that just a phenomenal arc there very consistently. And it just has to do with the top surface. It has nothing to do with the 8,000 levels of pressure sensitivity. The other thing is the consistency in hashing or hatch marks. You can see that I'm like getting used to some of the pressure here, and then it varies out different little by little. And that's simply because there's quite a bit of nib wobble and deflection happening with the WH1409 V2 over the Pro Gen 2. And it's hard to tell, but it is definitely there. And that's just another difference of, in combination with the very slick surface, much more nib deflection and nib wobble, and just the difference in control and line pressure. When you're quickly moving around and you're kind of expecting like drawing with a pencil, when you put a certain amount of pressure, you know how that thick of a line will come out every single time when you come back to return to the pen tablet. And that's where the inconsistency with the WH1409 V2 comes into play, where you just don't have that consistent expectation of pen pressure. So all that's going to lead you to is to undo the line and redo it again, undo the line, redo it again. So it's going to give you a little bit more time to get to that point of where I was getting with the Pro Gen 2. Now the Deco M is one where I wasn't using my shoulder or my elbow to draw these circles. I was using my wrist, and it's because these were all exactly the same zoom levels. So these two here, this was the default. This one was the default kind of pen setup, and then this was trying to just move it as far as to hard pressure as I can, because I was really struggling to get any type of consistent line pressures, and that's simply because when you draw with your wrist here, and you're also controlling pressure with your wrist, it's it's a twofold thing where now you're trying to compete against two things on your muscle memory, and it's really difficult to get that consistent kind of pen pressure and arcing that you need without the arcing kind of causing extra pressure from your wrist, and then trying to recompensate that by lifting the pen up a little bit more when drawing with your hands. And so it complicates it a lot more and makes it a lot harder to get these kind of like better, easier strokes. And so what I did here was to zoom in a lot. Let me see. I think it was like this zoomed in. I was this zoomed in, versus maybe something like this. I think that was the zoom level I was using, and so I was that zoomed in, and I still had it set to hard, and you can see just how much lighter my strokes were coming out over this version here. So it's not to say like the X3 Elite pen is a terrible pen, blah blah blah. It's just, it's just because this pen, the Deco M, is so much more smaller that it's really difficult for me to draw with my shoulders, and I'm relying more on my wrist to do a lot of my movements, and because of that, I'm sacrificing my ability to control pen pressure. So where's the 16K come into? Where can you see the difference between 8,000 and 16,000 levels? And to be honest, I don't know. I can't tell. Um, it's just the combination of all these things together gives it a much better pen experience. I don't know if the 16,000 levels solves anything that I was having a trouble with specifically. And maybe there's a little bit more variance in line width, but it's for me, I can't see it. All I see is a much better version for the Pro Gen 2 over everything else that I've had before. There's no competition. And from going from like a medium pen droplet to an extra large is just mind-boggling for me in terms of control. And yes, I've had that with the WH1409V2, but I've not had the better barrel design, the better tilt, the better pen tip. That being the felt tip, the better top surface. It's just like the Deco Pro Gen 2 delivers on all these little tiny more aspects. And the 16K, it for me feels like a marketing ploy, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't need it because this is such a far better experience for me in terms of being able to control the output of my drawings faster than I ever could before.
The pen tablet itself is extremely simple. It is end to end continuously drawn experience. It is a matte surface. It's not glossy or very smooth. It has a decent amount of grip. It's about the same grip as like the Deco M or Deco L, but it's not as grippy as like the Deco 01 V2, which I believe has way more grip than this. But in conjunction with the felt pen, I think that that evens out very, very good, specifically if you're drawing a little bit slower with the felt pen, which I've already talked about in my other part of this review. Um, the indicator lights here do turn on. You have the option to turn them off, but they only turn on when you're plugged in. In Bluetooth mode, they don't turn on, and that's simply because this only has 10 hours of battery life. I say only because, I don't know, anyone who's probably keeping this on their desk probably won't want to be charging this every single day. But if you're doing short stints or short sessions, probably won't have that issue. Now, with that said, it does come with a dedicated port that you can charge or just directly plug into your computer. It has the reset button or insert. It has two Bluetooth 5.0 profiles that you switch or toggle between, and then it has the power button here, which you use to turn off, turn off, turn on, turn off, or pair with your device. Now, this power button is a little bit of annoyance in that you have to. Let me see if this can focus. You have to press and hold the power button for about 5 seconds before the Bluetooth or this thing will just turn off and turn on in general. Then you have to press and hold for 4 seconds to turn it off. If you want to put it in pair mode, it actually needs to be on already. And then you press and hold on the power button, it will turn off, and then 2 seconds later, it will turn back on and blink rapidly. It takes a little too long. Whereas like the keyboard shortcut here, this is always on. I don't have to ever turn this off. I don't know the battery performance on this offhand. But this is always on. It's always available for me to use. I don't have to keep turning this on and off. I wish this was more like that. Maybe there was a standby mode I can go into without directly turning off and having to keep turning pushing the power button. But beyond that, it's a phenomenal drawing experience. It does have metal in the back. It does taper and has that little bit of ledge that I talked about, which I do like because you can put your your pen tablet like ledge on here, so it kind of goes invisible and it's not interrupting your drawing experience. The taller kind of design is something I definitely like a lot, because it gives me ever so much more to kind of keep my arm on top of, even though it kind of tapers down. But that kind of is a counter. So if anyone does draw in portrait mode, unfortunately, they're gonna have to deal with this kind of like ledge falling off, which I don't know if it's too much of a bad thing, to be honest, because it's still a flat surface. It doesn't like tilt. It's a flat surface through and through. So you're not dealing with tilt. It's just this little side kind of falls off a little if you were to draw in portrait mode that way. Beyond that, there's not really much else to say. If you have a Bluetooth 5.0 compatible PC or Mac OS or whatever other device, you'll have much better kind of usage than if it was like a Bluetooth 3 or 4 device, simply because that 5.0 protocol has a lot more resilience, and so you're going to have a lot less issues with kind of stuttering and performance in general with the pen when you're drawing. And when Mac Mini has a Bluetooth 5.0 profile and it has zero issues. I have a ton of Bluetooth devices connected to that already, and it's just not had any issues in general, kind of performing as it should need to do. That's it. I mean, there's not much else to say. Like I said, this is an extra large. It's very big. It is a big cleaning habit. You can see like the smudges already. I've been trying to clean off, and it just streaks the oils around. So I got to find a better way to clean this pen tablet, so it's not so smudgy and oily and stuff like that. But that's the pen
The
tablet.
keyboard shortcut or keyboard shortcut remote, it's a nice addition, but there's a couple of things here. So first off, if you're in your UI for XP Pen stuff, there is a left and right arrow to get to the remotes. If you're not seeing it, it has the roller. The roller has 4 modes you can put it into. And the only issue I have with that is that the middle button here that you press takes a lot of force to press in order to switch to it. I wish it was like a lighter pressed button compared to these other ones. They're super lightweight. And yeah, it takes too much force and too much time to switch between rotate and like zoom, and then have to like cycle back around if you went too far or something like that if you have all 4 modes enabled. So my current workflow is that I'll be working on a drawing, like, oh, okay, I need to rotate a little bit, draw that way, and rotate a little bit more, rotate it back. I need to flip it, go over here, draw some more. Let's go ahead and zoom in, zoom out, and rotate. So you can see that very quickly, like I will get quite annoyed that I can't do those actions very quickly if I was solely relying on this kind of dial to switch between that, because this dial switches independently of the 4 key groupings that you get with this here. So I'm going to go back to the XP Pen. So with this here, you can see that you have up to 4, and my only caveat with that is, well, this doesn't have to be the key switching group thing. I'm not sure what to call it. It's you can't have any one of these go to a specific group of the key groupings. And the only issue I would have that, let's say you have all 4, you gotta like, you're on 3, like, okay, I need to get back to 2. So I need to like, okay, go back to 2 and then press, that key and then go back to 1. And like, it's too much. It's too much memory mapping for me to try to do. I'd rather have it just laid out on one-handed keyboard that has like 30 plus buttons on it. This way I'm not having to think about how many times I need to press a button to get to another shortcut key, if that makes any sense. It's nice that they add it. It's definitely not necessary. I just think it's not as efficient as a one-handed keyboard in that terms, and that's probably why it's something I wouldn't necessarily use. Now, it's something I did forget to mention on this, is while it has 4 key groupings, it is wireless, and it also is wired. So if you want, you can plug it in the USB-C port. It does have the USB dongle that comes with a pen. This dongle only comes with this adapter if you do not have Bluetooth. So if you don't have Bluetooth and you want to use the wireless dongle thing, this way you're not having like multiple cords connecting to your computer, then you can use this here. This is the 2.4 gigahertz wireless adapter. If not, you can put it in Bluetooth mode and connect it with your Bluetooth capable machine, and both of these are connected via Bluetooth right now to my Mac Mini that you see here. The only other caveat to this is it has one like little indicator, physical like feeling indicator, so if you're not looking at it, it's like a little dot. My only catch with that is that like with the XP Pen
or the XP Deco, like they have almost like an indicator on almost every single button here. I'd wish that was true with this keyboard shortcut, simply because I can't always feel like the button there when I want to like recenter my hand, because I'm sometimes what happens is like I'm down here and I'm trying to recenter it and I can't figure out where my hand is at, and I just have to look at it again. It's just I wish there was more. So I'm like, oh, I'm at the edge of this button here, or I'm not. Why am I not hitting this key here? Oh, because I'm way over here now, or something like that. There's a little bit more tactility, more of those braille symbol things would have been nice. Just the one centering is okay, but again, that's that. And I don't think there's much else to talk about this. It works fine in wireless mode. There's not really any difference in terms of performance. My only catch is that undo does that weird jumping thing, which I had mentioned in the beginning of this review here. So for example, if I'm doing some hatching here, okay, and I want to undo, which I have it set to this key here. When I do that, like you can see my cursor is jumping. And the thing is that it's not an issue with me undoing in the software programming. It's specifically an issue with this keypad, because I'm going to go ahead and do this same thing on my my keyboard, just Alt Z. And when I do that, you can see that my cursor isn't doing that weird jumping thing. Now, the only thing I'm noticing between these two here is the cursor does change to an arrow when I'm doing this, and prevents me from drawing. When I'm doing undo here, it does also convert to an arrow, but it still just does that jumping. I don't understand why it's doing that weird jumping part where. And the only reason why I'm bringing this up, because normally when you're doing line art, you'll do like a stroke. Can you even see this? Hold on, let me double check. Yeah, okay. So when you're doing a stroke, and you undo, that's like you're going to expect to do this kind of like operation. And the only issue that you will have with that is that when it does that jump and stutter, it's just a little jarring. Like even though your pen's going to be in the same spot as you would expect it to be in the first place, it's a little jarring. I got stuck. There you go. It's a little jarring to have it keep jumping, not to the place that you were kind of expecting, if that makes any sense. Anyways, that's it. That's really all I want to say about this kind of keyboard shortcut thing. It's nice, definitely usable. I think anyone who's doing like photo editing stuff, this is perfect. But if you're someone who uses a ton of keyboards, specifically like if you're in Blender, there's no way in the world I would kind of depend on this to be usable, because I'd get lost on which mode I'm in, or key grouping I'm in, and then whichever one this is on. I'd rather just have it set to an actual keyboard or one-handed keyboard for those type of shortcuts. So let's talk about the iPad and an iPhone. iPad OS and Android, or not Android, iPad OS and iOS with IBIS Paint X only for the drawing application has support for the XP Pen Deco Pro, Deco Pro wireless, new wireless version. The Deco Pro that you see here is the Deco Pro 2nd generation, and the Deco MW and LW. So you don't need this specific tablet to do what I'm about to say in this section of the review. I'm just going to have some things that are specific to the pen and the tablet itself. But I will say, if you're interested in potentially drawing on your iPhone or an older Android tablet, you can just go with the Deco MW, not the Deco M, but the Deco MW, the one that actually has Bluetooth support. So what I'm going to show here is that it gives you a cursor to work with, so you can touch all the actual points. This only works in IBIS Paint X, so you can't use the rest of your iPad this way. But it gives you access to all of the UI in IBIS Paint X. So you can go here, change your pressure curve. You can change the actual connected thing. So Apple Pencil, XP Pen, and they recently also added Helion as well. And then you can change the two buttons on this pen here. Unfortunately, the eraser does not work. It doesn't register anything. So for example, I have the back to as a kind of like a undo, and the right to kind of do the brush swap. So if I want to do that and then erase it, I can. So there's a little bit of some stuff there. Just the eraser doesn't register at all. And then the curve that's up here, this is from an Apple Pencil. It's super like thin. The hatching is really, really thin and consistent. I try to replicate that, but the one thing I will notice, at least with whatever combination I have set up here, is that the initial activation force is a lot more than the 3 grams. I can actually have it glide across and it won't always draw. So I mean, you can hear the pen going across and it's not drawing. So when I try to do those super light lines, it doesn't work. And it's not to say like there's no pressure, because this is a big brush, so I can go quite large. So there's not an issue with like there's not enough pressure, but I'm not able to hit those super light points of my brush, and I would have to do things to where I would need to make my brush a lot smaller to try to hit those lighter lines as I would for like I did on the Apple Pencil. So that's the only kind of like major thing I'm noticing. There's a little bit of lag, but that's actually because it's being relayed through this off-brand HDMI adapter for the iPad. If I was using the official one, there'd be a lot less lag. And I don't mean like lag that when I go do my stroke, it doesn't happen on the iPad, because it definitely is there. I mean, this is super responsive regardless. So it's not an issue with that. It's just there's a little bit of latency when I want to look at my actual screen over here versus the iPad itself. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, you don't need the Deco Pro 2nd generation for this specific type of feature for iPad OS and iOS. You can go with the Deco MW to get those same features, because this, is very much the size of an iPad and it'll work great with your iPhone as well. This is an Android phone, some LG something that doesn't exist anymore at this point, but I have it connected to a USB-C hub, HDMI, which is why you see it mirrored, and then it's a wired connection. And this seems to be faring a bit better than what it was on the iPad OS, iPad OS or iOS, in that I can seemingly get a better, thinner stroke. I don't know if you can tell already, but like I couldn't even get this thinness of a stroke to happen on the iPad or the iPhone. This is IBIS Paint X is using 13.9. I think it was the size I used on the iPad as well. But yeah, it's just a night and day difference in terms of control of how much pressure, because it is a rather big brush that's on here actually. So kind of get the idea of that. There is no wireless support. It looks like there is some Bluetooth functionality on Android. So I have it. It's not plugged in at all. It's connected to Bluetooth, so I paired it with the device, open IBIS Paint X, and I drew a circle when it was plugged in, and you can see it's a perfect circle. It was of my coaster, and then I drew the same coaster when it was connected through Bluetooth. So you can see the quite a long shape here, oval shape, and this is more reminiscent of probably being designed for a phone over Bluetooth than an Android tablet, at least through IBIS Paint X. I haven't tested any other applications for this, but when testing with IBIS Paint X, you get the same functionality still. So you get all the pressure that you would want, the thin light strokes. You also get the ability to still erase, and the eraser works better. It's not doing that weird jumping thing back and forth that I was having earlier on my other Android device. And yeah, it's just the issue with the orientation. And it seems to, like, if I rotate this device, it will also try to rotate it via Bluetooth on my pen tablet. So I'm assuming a lot of this is coming from IBIS Paint X. It's not really something that Android has built in. Or you do have to be plugged in. And one thing to note is these two buttons do work, but also the eraser works. Kind of. It does this like weird jumping motion. I'm not quite sure. And then when you start to erase it, it continues to erase. I've seen this happen in other applications, so it's not a problem with IBIS Paint X. It's probably something to do with the sensor on here and how this kind of works. I don't know. But yeah, you get eraser support. The other thing I will note is that because this is Android, your mileage is going to vary greatly, meaning that obviously aspect ratio is involved. This can correctly reorient it based off my orientation of the phone with the tablet, meaning that I'm in landscape, I can draw in landscape. If I go into portrait, I can draw in portrait. Normally on these Android devices, you can't necessarily always do that, and you have to do like orientation lock, and then you have like all your UI kind of rotated around, and you can kind of work around it. But I've made a completely separate video on like kind of tablets for Android. This is completely overkill for it, but you can kind of see the workflow if you really wanted to, and you had the ability to get display out,
then you could have a workflow where you kind of still have like a computer-ish type of feel, where you have a tablet and a screen. So with that though, also is the aspect ratio. So unlike the iPad and the iPhone, it doesn't reorient and lock to the 16:10 aspect ratio that the pen tablet is. This is on 18 by something. So if I go ahead and try to draw a circle, it's going to come out more like an oval. So that's an oval, not a circle. And so yeah, if I was drawing on my Android tablet, it'll be like a circle. So yeah, it definitely works. You got your button controls. I've tried many of the applications on here. They work just fine. They detect the pressure as expected, and you kind of get universal support at this point for Android. No drivers needed, just like on iOS and iPad OS, but you can use any drawing application you want, including things like High Paint. That worked fine too. I did notice in High Paint the eraser does not work as for like erasing per se. It just works as picking it up as another cursor, and it has that same like jumping issue with it. But yeah, that's Android.